Hi guys, this is Devnath from Officers IAS Academy, and in this video we are going to discuss about the National Biofuel Policy. So first of all, why was this in news? If you see, so National Biofuel Policy was formulated by the Government of India in 2018, and in 2019, a few months back, the Cabinet gave its approval for the biofuel policy. Now first of all, what is biofuel? Any fuel which is harnessed from the destruction of biomass is called biofuel, and it can be made from biomass such as those containing a high amount of starch, a high amount of sugar, or sometimes even from oils. Biofuel can be generated. When it is gotten from starch, you can use potato and any other material, any other biomass which has starch, and any other material which has sugar such as sugarcane juice, sweet sorghum, etc., tapioca for that matter. We can harness biofuel from these, and also rapeseed oil, soya bean oil, coconut oil, all of these can be used for the generation of biofuel. So what is the need for formulation of the biofuel policy? First of all, it is a renewable source of energy. So we use a lot of conventional sources which are non-renewable, fossil fuel based sources of energy which are definitely non-renewable, and this one is a renewable source of energy. It is good for the environment. That is the first reason or the first purpose as to why we need a biofuel policy. The second reason is that it augurs well with other Government of India schemes such as Make in India, Swach Bharat and Skill India. For example, if biofuel policy is formulated and biofuel refineries are set up in India, we can make the fuel that we have to use even within our own country. That will augur well with Make in India. Swach Bharat, because it makes use of municipal solid waste, and that can reduce the amount of municipal solid waste outside. We produce almost 62,000 million metric tons of municipal solid waste every year, and 20% use and 1 ton use of that solid waste which is produced can give in 20% drop in fuel. So that is also something which goes well with one of Government India schemes, which is Swach Bharat. The other is doubling farmers' income. So if we get feedstock from the farmers who sometimes during the years of surplus have to discard the crops that they grow, if we can procure this and make fuels out of it, it will double the farmers' income. That also augurs well with the Government of India policy. Another reason as to why we need a biofuel policy is that it will increase the employment generation within India. So biorefineries, they will be set up, they will need a lot of employment. So if this can be made in India, it can improve the employment generation. And finally, not last but never the least, it will reduce the import that we have in terms of fuel. It will lead to import substitution. Through that, we can save valuable forex. So these are the needs broadly for having a biofuel policy as such. So before we go into the policy, let us see what the generations of biofuels are. Normally, how are they categorized? So the first generation biofuels are made primarily from food crops such as sugarcane, sugar beet, etc. And these are directly harnessed from food crops. Now using these biofuels created that problem. It created a debate between food versus fuel. Should we divert the croplands for food production, or should we divert the croplands for fuel production, was the question or the debate that was raised. And with food security concerns in India quite high, it was decided that food crops should not be diverted to make fuels, even though if they have a lot of benefits, and food crops should stay as food crops and we should not divert the farm fields. So this brought about another change in the production of biofuels, which is second generation biofuels. These are fuels which are made from non-food crops, any lignocellulosic crops which have their own biomass from which biofuel can be harnessed. These are second generation biofuel crops. Crops like jatropha, etc. are used for this purpose. But this also brought in another debate, another level of food versus fuel debate. It was seen that the minimum support price that was given to the food crops was a tad lesser than the amount that is given for the procurement of crops from these fields, and that is why farmers were more incentivized to give their fields to the crops which were to be given to the biorefineries. And that also brought about that question, should farm fields be diverted against food security concerns? So that brought in the next generation of biofuels, which is made out of algae. So algae were harnessed, biomass, that is also biomass, fuel were harnessed, that is 3G biofuels, and there is also fourth generation biofuels, which does not involve the destruction of biomass per se. It is electrofuel or photobiological fuel, as they say. It does not involve the destruction of biomass. That is the general categorization of biofuels. Now, how has Government of India classified biofuels under the National Biofuel Policy? First of all, it talks about the first generation, which is alternatively called in the policy as basic biofuels. Those biofuels which can be made from basic materials such as sugarcane juice, bee molasses, the byproduct of sugar production. These are called as first generation. These are termed as basic biofuels. There is second generation biofuels, which is made from the harnessing of municipal solid waste. Like I said, we produce 62 million metric tons of municipal solid waste every year in our country. If only 20% of that, if only 1 ton of that could be used, then it can give in for 20% biofuel production. These are called advanced biofuels under the National Biofuel Policy. And the government is also incentivizing the production of these fuels. We'll talk about this under the salient features. And there is third generation, just like the third generation in the normal classification. These are also to be made from algae. So this is broadly the classification of biofuels under the policy: basic biofuels, advanced biofuels, and third generation biofuels made from algae, and also bio-CNG. Now, what are the salient features of the National Biofuel Policy? The first salient feature is that it envisages the use of sugar beet, sugar sorghum, sweet sorghum, and bee molasses. It makes use of all of these and tries to include it as part of the biofuel mix, and also increase the biofuel amount, and also increase the biofuel that can be gotten from this. So that is the first salient feature. And it also envisages the use of damaged or rotten crops and make use of it, or rotten potatoes or any vegetables for that matter, and use it as fuel for the ethanol blending program of the Government of India. Now, one common problem that is associated with storage of food grains under the National Food Security Act is that a lot of these food grains are stored in the cover and plinth model. So there is just a concrete plinth on top of which the food grain sacks are placed. It is covered with low density or high density polyethylene sheets. Now this is susceptible to a lot of weather. Changes. A lot of pests like rats come and consume these crops, and that is causing a damage of a lot of crops and wastage of crops. And also in the years of surplus production, farmers realize a glut of production of crops such as potato, tomato, etc. And sometimes, because they do not get the correct price in the market, these are just strewn away on the road just to go as waste. No money for the farmers, and the food that is produced also goes for waste. So biofuel policy envisages that these can be used as feedstock for biofuel production, and the farmers will be incentivized for whatever they give the biofuel refineries. This is again done for the ethanol blended program of the Government of India. Now this program envisages the use of 5% of biodiesel in the high speed diesel and 20% of biofuel in the petrol mix by 2030. 5% for diesel, 20% biofuel for petrol by 2030. This is a goal that Government of India has. This biofuel policy will help that goal. That is the second salient feature. The third salient feature is that it tries to set up something called as the National Biofuel Coordination Committee. So that will take care of the concerns of the farmers if they are giving feedstock to the biofuel refineries, and in years of surplus production when there is nobody to take their crops. This coordination committee will step in and make sure that these crops are procured, the correct price is given to the farmers, and it helps in doubling farmers' income. It also has another salient feature in that it proposes something called as the Pradhan Mantri Jeevan Yojana. Jaiv Indhan Vatavaran Anukul Fasal Avashesh Nivaran Yojana is the full form of the PM Jeevan Yojana. It seeks to give viability gap funding for those companies which are trying to produce 2G biofuels under the policy. Now 2G biofuels are advanced biofuels, remember, just like we mentioned before. These are to be made from municipal solid waste. Now setting up a plant which uses municipal solid waste and makes biofuel out of it is going to cost a lot of money. Private players, for the cost that is involved and for the realization time of the investment that they've put in, would not like to enter into this field. So for that purpose, whatever amount that the private players are not able to give, the government will pitch in and give in a grant, and the grant amount is rupees 5,000 crore for 6 years. It says we will give you that viability gap funding. Please start the project, because these projects are economically justified, but just that they are not financially viable. But the government, if it pitches in and gives the finance up ahead, then these refineries can be set up, and municipal solid waste can also be removed from our own towns and cities. It is causing such an eyesore, and it is causing different pollution problems. It gets into groundwater, it contaminates groundwater, and all these problems associated with municipal solid waste can be contained by this one salient feature of the biofuel policy. The next salient feature, and the last that we are going to discuss here, is that it seeks to set up supply chains for the constant supply of feedstock for biofuel production. Of course, there are many other salient features. You can go through the document. For the lack of time, we limit ourselves to this much, and these are the important salient features of the policy. Next, what are the advantages of having a policy? We've seen what biofuel is, what the generations of biofuels are, what the need for biofuel policy is, what the salient features are. Now we'll talk about the advantages. First of all, it leads to import substitution. We spend so much forex for importing these costly fuels such as petrol and diesel. If we were to use biofuels, it is estimated that just 5% blend of biofuel with petrol will lead to the reduction of 1.8 million barrels of crude oil. You can do the math and extrapolate as to how much that will cost. This is reduced and this is substituted. This will lead to import substitution. That is the first advantage. Second advantage is that this biofuel policy envisages also the use of used cooking oil. Now in restaurants you see oil being used again and again for frying, and from these restaurants it goes to small joints and those shops which are on the roadside and fast food joints. These are the foods which are normally liked by people consume it, but because these used cooking oils have a lot of trans fats, they contribute to a lot of non-communicable diseases like cardiovascular diseases, liver disease, Alzheimer's disease, etc. And this non-communicable disease is becoming a big burden for the government of India to contain, because if you have a lot of NCDs trouble in the country, then the productivity of people is going to come down, the living age of the people is going to come down, they will not be able to work productively, and this will reduce their employability, this will reduce employment, and this will ultimately lead to poverty. And also on the other side, government of India has to spend on health schemes to improve the health and living of the people. So to contain that used cooking oil problem, it envisages the use of these oils. So that is also beneficial for the people living in the country, and also to reduce the non-communicable disease burden of the entire economy. The third advantage is that it is going to double farmers' income. So earlier probably they were putting out the domestic feed, they were burning their feedstock, they were not using it properly. In years of surplus production, they were just throwing it out. Now if these were to be used for biofuel production, then definitely the farmers will get a lot of income, that is doubling farmers' income, and that will also augur well with the government of India agenda. The next associated benefit or advantage of this is that if bio feedstock is going to be taken from the farmers, they would not have the need to burn it in the first place. Now we all know that Delhi touched a very poor or a very severe air quality of 500 in the recent days, and one of the contributing factors for that is the stubble burning in Punjab, Haryana, etc. Right? So if the feedstock is procured by the government for the oil refineries and the farmers are going to get money for that also, stubble burning will reduce. Pollution problem in Delhi will also be contained, is what is sought as an advantage from this biofuel policy. The next advantage is that biofuels have to be harnessed, they have to produce through biorefineries, and these biorefineries are going to be set up in rural areas. It is because from that where they are going to get their feedstock from. It is common sense that industries will be set up in places from where raw materials can be easily procured. So if it is going to be set up in a rural area, the rural employment generation will increase, and all these people will start getting a lot more skilled than what they are, and their poverty is also expected to reduce, and their hunger is also expected to reduce, and they can put this money in other useful sectors such as education and health improvement. So on an whole, it will lead to the overall development of the rural community. That is one of the key advantages of the national biofuel policy. Along with this, there are many advantages. For the lack of time, we will not be venturing into it, but this gives succinctly as to what the biofuel policy is about and what does it mean to all of us citizens. Until next time, thank you.